This is Josh Pate, and you're listening to the Football Talk podcast with Coach Chip.
I've started something new. This is the first episode of the Football Talk with Coach Chip podcast, as you already heard in the intro. And I thought I'd go ahead and just prove to everybody that I am good buddies with Josh Pate. And here he is. I was one of the many people that heard him on the radio when he filled in for our pal Bobby Z on a talk show down in Columbus, Georgia. Pate is from Harris County, a little below me. I'm in Harris County too, but he's from the southern end of the county. And the part what us northerners up here like to call that North Columbus.
That's correct, yeah.
And we said when we heard him, said, this cat's going to be a big deal one day, man. And sure enough, he believed in himself. And I tried to talk him out of things and tried to give him advice. And he didn't take any of it. It worked out.
That's a stretch. That is an absolute stretch. That's how a northern countier would revisionize history there.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, we're high atop beautiful downtown Pine Mountain, the cultural epicenter of West Georgia.
Yeah, and what a view it must be this morning. How are the fine folks at Huddle House, Callaway Gardens? How's the economy there in Pine Mountain?
Huddle House is closed. It's now a fish house.
That's an absolute shame because I skipped many a first period weightlifting session to go to Huddle House.
And now if you want a breakfast, you have to go to Eddie Mae's, which is not a bad got-to. That's pretty good food.
That's actually true. All right. Yeah. I'll endorse that.
I eat Eddie Mae's every Wednesday morning. Yeah, so that's when you get to be my age, you have appointment meals. Well, Josh, my normal thing is only appeals to hardcore fans and football coaches, because we do get in the weeds on Football Talk with Coach Chip, the videos, talking about three techs and things like that. And even some folks that think they're hardcore fans will watch it for a little bit and go like, well, what language are they speaking? So, and I wanted to do a little bit different. My podcast is going to be different because obviously it's going to be more of an audio medium than a video medium. And I'm going to do it. And after you, I'm going to do a lot of coaches and things like that. Right now, I'm making a commercial for future podcasts, Josh.
Sure.
But I thought it'd be a great one to kick it off. We were going to do something like this last year, and then life got in the way and football got in the way, which is not a bad thing. But I was glad I could talk you into doing it after a year of waiting for me and you to get together. I just want to let you be you, and I'm going to ask you some questions. By the way, I know the answer to most of these questions.
Right.
But a lot of our viewers may not, and our listeners may not. Well, let's get started. All right. How did you get here? How did Josh Pate become Josh Pate, the crown prince of college football?
Well, Dan met Trish at Edgewood at 1984-ish. That's how that started. But you were one of the very few people, actually, and a couple of other friends of ours that would know what I mean when I say Sports Talk Radio on 1580, the Zone WIOL in Columbus, Georgia, used to just be national from morning to mid-afternoon to afternoon drive. And then there was this local show that just popped up. They tried some before and they came and they went, but there was this local show that popped up, 2010, 11, 12, early 20-teens.
It was the end of the Cam Newton National Championship year.
Yep.
I still remember because one day I'm listening to Paul Feinbaum talk about Auburn's run, and then the next day this cockeyed Yankees on.
Yeah, and look, he never stopped being a cockeyed Yankee. Let's just be clear about that. He just became one that we accepted into our graces. But while you were listening to that, I was over, I had left CSU, which is Columbus State University in Columbus, for those listening, because I had no real drive or purpose behind what I was doing there. I was just wasting Hope Scholarship dollars. And so I just went and I worked construction. I worked heating and air installation. I was in a fabric warehouse at the specific time we're talking about, just, making enough to afford an extra value meal or two and make sure I had a roof over my head, which most of the time I did. And I was listening to Sports Talk Radio every day, just immersed in it, like a lot of us do. wanted to do it, certainly didn't have any family in the business, certainly didn't have the right degree, didn't have a degree at all. I had no wherewithal or know-how how to get in that business. So I just thought I'd listen to it from a distance. But when local sports talk radio was thrown in my face, I thought, hey, that's not from Bristol, Connecticut. That's a guy just down the road. I could actually meet this guy at a gas station. I could see him in Publix or Winn-Dixie. Well, so I started emailing the guy. I started DMing him on, I think at the time, Facebook Messenger. And I just was asking, can I come sit in? I've never seen live production happen before. So he finally answered me. He said, yeah, you can come in. Bobby Z was his on-air name. Bobby Wroblewski is his real life name. And you and I both know him very well. And they were doing their show from over there on Macon Road, Winton Road. How old you are and how long you've been in Columbus will determine which road you call that. And I went in there a couple times a week for a couple of months, and I just saw live radio happen. Never seen it happen before. And then his co-host one day, we know him as Pun. He calls in not too long before airtime. He's got something wrong. He can't make it in. So Bobby just looked at me in the middle of afternoon drive in the middle of college football season and said, you want to hop on today? So I said, absolutely. So I hopped on and we did the show, and it was really fun. It was the first exposure I ever had to live radio or live broadcast of any kind. Up until that point, I just tried to play make-believe. And it was so fun. And he said afterwards, I think there's a spot for you here. Like, I think you can do this. I would love for you to be a part of this. And so, at that point, I start meeting folks like the artist formerly and maybe currently known as Bruce Wayne. It's this crazy dude from Pine Mountain who would call in every day after football practice. And, back in those days, we got a 3-hour show. And if you've got a rotating log of 5 to 10 regular callers, when a caller calls in, you're clearing the runway for them. 15 minutes, 20 minutes, what's happening in your life? What'd you have for lunch? Do you have any take on sports? And that was what it was like. And so, I'm in a weird position because for the first time in my life, I started to form relationships with people I had never seen before. I had never met before. I was meeting them through the medium of radio, which is just the beautiful concept of theater of the mind, period, which is a lost art today. It's why I love the podcasting platform and the podcasting team. And I still try and insert those themes even onto the show we do, which has a full nationally syndicated video product on it. I'm a big believer in some of the principles I learned there because I talked to you 30 times before I ever saw your face. I talked to a lot of those guys 30, 40, 50 times before I ever knew anything about you, knew what you looked like. You could have been 5'5" or 6'5", black, white. I had no clue. And what it did was it made your mind work. And the theater of the mind concept is if you don't have the visual medium, which is afforded to us, if you have eyesight, any other experience you have, you usually have a visual medium. It's just that's one of the only ones that you don't. So your mind starts to fill it in. It's the old FM DJ deal where nowadays people don't listen to radio like they used to. But I remember, being driven to school back in the day, and I'd listen to those local FM DJs in Columbus. I never saw their face. My mind created their face. Well, as callers, you guys were the same way. My mind created what you look like. And then imagine what a letdown it is when I actually see what you look like in person. Because my mind did such a better job on you, unfortunately, than our good Lord did on you. And that's only half joking. But it was a fun time because then I started meeting all of you and then we're off to the races. But what I always remembered, still remember it to this day, people who listen to this will either know this or come to know this, was I was fascinated by how many axioms or turns of phrase or sayings or metaphors that you just rattle off. And you weren't doing it to be funny. It was so ingrained in the DNA of your vernacular. You just did it. That's a lifetime of interacting with people. That's a lifetime of coaching. That's a lifetime of having to know how to communicate with people from many different walks of life, which is what you have to learn to do in coaching. And I remember the first few times that we would have calls, I'd be asked by a buddy or my dad or something, how's it going? How has it been? I caught some of the show today. I didn't hear the whole thing. How's it going? And I remember commenting about you. He said, there's this guy, I think his name's Bruce, because that's what I thought your name was at the time.
London Mahogany named me that.
Yeah. London.
Producer.
I was, yeah. And I said, you ought to hear this guy. He just goes and goes and goes. It sounds like a stand-up routine, but I'm pretty sure he's not reading off a script. It's just the way the guy talks. And those were the early days. That's how I got my start.
And then he felt so confident in you, he left and went back home to Wisconsin for a vacation. And then you came on and treated it like fine bomb. You had us on there for 5 minutes. We're saying on to the next call.
Let me tell you,
I'm only halfway through here.
Yeah, not to make light of this, but I remember the day this happened because that was the day the Sandy Hook school shooting happened. It was mid-morning, and so the entire world is completely like kneecapped by this story. And it's like the world, the country kind of shut down and everyone's focused on that. And that's the day I'm doing my first solo radio gig. And we had no clue. I mean, we're talking internally. Are we supposed to go on air? Are we supposed to preempt for programming? What kind of programming do we even pass through? Because we could have patched through ESPN radio, the national feed. So we decided amongst ourselves, well, look, if people want to watch that or listen to that, there are 57 different places they can go. There is a chance that there are folks out there who want to escape from this and just listen to folks talk about sports for 3 hours because it's much better than what the alternative is in the real world right now. And so we did the show. And I remember thinking to myself, of course, I'm not equipped to know how to handle this. I'm not equipped to know how to do the show as is. So let's just go. And that day's kind of a blur, but I remember everyone's got their idea. Just like if you take over a football team and you've never been a head coach before, you got your idea of how things should run. Mm-hmm. And of course, 5 months, 5 years down the road, you'll look back and you'll laugh at 60% of what you thought you knew, just like I do, far more than 60%. I laugh at what I thought I knew, but I would listen and I would think, I wish the pacing was a little bit better. I wish we could infuse more voices here. I wish that, if you listen to the quarter hours of the show, I wish you'd be exposed to more than one thing per 15 minutes. And then I learned that maybe community is built a little different way at the local level than programming is done at the national level. And so I evolved.
Let's get to football. After all, it is football talk with Coach Chip and Josh Pate today. I want to ask my son's question first. By the way, Kyle, I know you believe me, but now here's the proof. Because he tried to turn me on to you about a year ago. He said, Daddy, I got this great thing I've been watching on YouTube. Remember I told you?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, yeah, I've heard of him.
I'll try him out. We'll see.
All right. His question is this, and it's a good question. Of all the head coaches you've interviewed the last few years, which, by the way, that speaker series, Pate, that's like Peabody stuff. Of all the head coaches you've interviewed, who stands out in your mind?
Oh, Mac Brown. Mac Brown at North Carolina went and sat down
without a second thought. God almighty, man.
Well, look, some of the other coaches have even shared that sentiment. I mean, I've gone to 15 different campuses this spring. We've had the best of the best on. Started with Kirby, worked our way all the way down the roster, but we went up to North Carolina, sat down with Mac Brown, and Mac Brown's one of those guys where you'll never hear a negative word about him before you go speak with him, but you may think to yourself, well, I've never met him, which I hadn't. I'd never met Mac Brown before, never spoken with him before. And he's the kind of guy that makes you feel like you've known him for 30 years, and you sit down and there's just an ease with which you talk with him. And all of a sudden 40 minutes has gone by and you were only given 30, but then you look at the SID standing off camera and he's like, go, just keep going. He's wound up. Just keep going. And it was a pleasure because right before we started the sit down with him, he had just gotten off an ACC coaches meeting. And he said, you ought to have heard that. I said, what happened? And this is in the very thick of, the portal stuff and what's going to happen with the entire conference and what should we do about NIL, just the stuff everyone's talking about. And he said, well, I'm in a role now where I'm the head coach at North Carolina, but I've also been doing this 50 years. And I'm the only one on our meetings really that feels free to say whatever he wants without fear of retaliation. No one's going to fire me. I'd retire before I got fired. No one's going to discipline me. I'm the oldest guy in the room by a mile. And he said, for a long time, we've sort of sat back and let the wrong people put their hands on the wheel in college football. And so me and, some other folks, we've decided it's it's time to take the wheel back. And that's not an easy thing once you've relinquished control of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the precursor to him sitting down with us. And so he sits down and rolls up those sleeves. And I've got a field producer who's on the road with me every week. And she covers the NFL too, works playoffs, works Super Bowl. She's pretty hardened to this business and is around coaches a lot. And I glance over at her a couple of times during the Mac Brown interview. She got tears coming down her face, gone and gotten her tissues, wiping her face off, because he just talked on a personable level about how the game meshes with his life and his wife, and how she's incorporated into his life, and the balance that you have to strike. But also he got really in the weeds on player development, player relations, how it's changed, how much crap gets thrown at the feet of a lot of kids for the mistakes of a lot of adults in the room, and has for a long time. And it was the best 40 minutes, I think, that we've had, bar none, in that entire series.
Now, let me tell you, I've tried to get this across to people. And by the way, you and Buckets, those of y'all don't know, Buckets is a mutual friend of ours, told me to beware on Twitter. I think your word term was cesspool. But I've learned how to negotiate it. I'm just not, and I've just quit trying to educate people or inform people about certain things. Some people take your shtick seriously when, your football stuff is serious, but you have the theater of the mind thing going, even on your videos. I compare it to this. When my daddy came back from Vietnam in the early 70s, he brought a cassette player, a really nice one. And I started making shows on cassette tapes. I would play music on my record player and record it. And I'd pretend to be the DJ. I was like 9, 10 years old. And I had my own little world in that room. Sometimes you come across, even before you went to Nashville and went big time, you come across as it's almost like you're that little boy playing pretend, but with real things, which leads me to my question. I know what it is, but what is the deal with Pate State, the origin of it? Why the Freights?
The origin is, it popped in my head one day. The origin is separate from the theory behind it. The theory behind it is no different than if you go grab barbecue every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 11:30 with the same 4 or 5 buddies. It's community. That's what it is. You've got it. See, you and I grew up in the rural South, so we've grown up in small communities. You could walk up and down your street there in Pine Mountain, and if I came to visit you, you'd tell me who lives here, who lives there, what she does for a living. Let me tell you what happened to her sister 6 months ago. It's community. I have always been a believer that if you're halfway good at what you're doing, no matter how big you scale your audience, you can still have community. You just have to be a lot more intentional about how you cultivate and develop it. So you get an audience a little bit bigger than what maybe we had at the local level. Well, you can't know all of them on a personal level, but you can be personable with every one of them. What you have to do is you have to insert community building mechanisms and theory into your production. So I'm thinking to myself one day, well, all I talk about is college football. I couldn't care less about the NBA. I love baseball, but I don't talk MLB. It's just a college football show. How do we insert community there? Well, the first thing I thought is, why don't we build an entire ecosystem around this show that is tantamount to what you would have on a campus? So we just need to make up a fictitious name. So Pate State rhymed. That's why I presented it that way. But what it really is it's certainly not a brick and mortar location. It's not some online college. What it is, it's an idea. It is emblematic of a way we do things, a way we present things, a way that the way that I feel about college football, the way I think a lot of other people feel about college football. And if basically you check those boxes, if you love the Saturday game, if you believe in what football is supposed to be, and we share those characteristics and sentiments, then that's what the whole Pate State thing was supposed to be. It's just community building. But then when you get really serious about it and you realize this is an important part of people's day, no different than the 3 to 6 window where I used to listen to local. That was an important part of my day. I always thought to myself, or it was 4 to 7 Eastern time. If I can just get to 4 o'clock, I know I don't get off work till 5, but if I just get to 4 o'clock, that's the finish line, because then they'll carry me the rest of the way. I mean,
Right.
that's a whole work day. Well, in our world, people think the same way. People either think, let me catch that show live at 8 Eastern, 7 Central, and that's how I'm going to cap my day. Or a lot of them, a majority of them, save it to watch the next day, whether it's on their commute to work, whether it's to get them through work in the most difficult portion of their day, or it's their drive home. Well, people lean on that. As crazy as it sounds for something as insignificant as a college football show, our numbers show people lean on that. And it becomes an actual infused part of their day. Well, if it's that important to them, it better be more important to you. And you better learn how to mix those elements in, because if you don't, there's an ocean of other shows they can go listen to. What makes yours any different? Well, the one that makes yours different is going to be the connectivity that they feel to it. Not because you were right about who's going to win the Ball State-Kent State game. No one cares about that 5 months or 5 weeks from now. They do care about how they feel about the product, how the product makes them feel. It's the same reason you and I watch college football on Saturday, but we don't watch the Montreal Alouettes nearly as much. They're playing football. One of them's Canadian, one of them's United States brand, but we're connected to one of them for reasons that extend beyond just the field.
Cool. Why the Freights? Why not the Tornadoes or the Twisters?
So no one out there would have guessed Freights. Pate State Freights also has rhyming infused in it. I love trains. I always have. You talked about being a little boy. Well, there's a majority of me is still a little boy. You cut me open, like 70% of me hadn't changed since I was 10. Not braggadociously. I'm just saying that is the way it is. But I love trains. I thought it was a better name. And Iowa State's already got the Cyclones.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah, we've never talked about it.
I wanted to go a direction no one had gone before. And I thought also the mascot potential was a little more creative with Freights.
I'm not going to get into thoughts on expanded playoff. You've done that ad nauseum on your show. If y'all want to hear some great takes on the expanded playoff, go to Late Kick with Josh Pate on YouTube, and it is there. One word answers, or 2 words. Up and coming assistant coaches we're going to be hearing about in the future. Give me 2 or 3.
Kane Womack. I think most people have already heard of him because he was a head coach. But he's the DC at Alabama right now. I think also, I don't want to stick with Alabama, but Colin Hitchler is a guy they just hired as their safeties coach. I think the world of him. Blake Baker down at LSU, love him. Those are a few.
What does he coach?
He was just hired down there as DC. And I'll tell you another one, Kevin Peoples, who's the D-line coach that came down there from Missouri. Both of them came from Missouri. Those are really, really hot names to know.
Okay. Up and coming G5 head coaches that we're going to be hearing about maybe at a P5, Power 5.
John Summerall. You know him because he was just at Troy and took the Tulane job. He probably had bigger offers than that. Well, power offers. But truth be told, the Tulane job's better than a lot of the P4. I think Barry Odom out at UNLV is going to be able to pick a pretty good opportunity for himself too.
P5 coaches on the hot seat besides Sam Pittman and Billy Napier.
Well, it ain't Neil Brown anymore, so that's good. I think West Virginia turned things around. I'm glad you excused Pittman, because that's its own whole thing.
And that'll break my heart.
Well,
you know, I'm an offensive line guy. And
I don't think it would go down that way. I think he'd retire before that ever happened to him. Jimbo's out of here now. I would say, you said excluding Napier too, right?
Yeah, excluding Napier.
Man,
that's his own story. I mean, it may not be anybody. I mean, is there somebody out there? That's because you got your finger on the pulse, so to speak, to use a cliche.
There was so much churn recently. We just did a segment on this. There were not a lot of firings in the previous cycle, or 2 cycles ago, which was weird. I don't know. Pittman and Napier would be my top 2. Neil Brown not on there anymore. I don't know who my third would be at the moment. You know, I don't even like doing those kind of segments because I think so much more goes into what is successful and what it takes to succeed at that level that no one can see. And so I always hate doing those segments.
Hit close to home here in your heart. How are Matt Campbell and your beloved Iowa State Cyclones looking for the upcoming year?
Strong. I would say strong to quite strong. I think that for people like us, I think there are a lot of folks probably watching who share similar loves for the sport. If you love the developmental aspect, if you love the evaluative aspect, if you love the team building aspect and continuity, if you like a more balanced competitive product, the Big 12 is awesome. They don't have the biggest media deal on the block. They don't have the biggest schools on the block, but they're about 10 teams. You look at the Vegas odds even, about 10 teams in that top group that are bunched together that could win that thing. Iowa State's got a kid named Rocco Becht at quarterback. And I went up there about a month.
What a great name.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, he's born to be a quarterback. And I went up there about a month and a half ago and I sat down with Campbell and the staff really. And he let me sit in on their staff meetings. And that's first off a high level of trust. But secondly, it's a really good look behind the operations of a program. Well, it's pretty well known in there. And I have no qualms telling the story out of there. There were big NIL offers that came that kid's way and he turned them down. It's one thing to be a diamond in the rough and they find you and develop you and you become a good player at Iowa State. It's another thing to become that, but then turn down the offers that most kids would have gotten on the recruiting trail. You know, it's a little bit late, but he turned it all down. Well, I want you to imagine what that does to a locker room full of veteran players, because all of them are veterans on that team this year. And that coaching staff, when your trigger, your signal caller there, your trigger man has options to go elsewhere. I'm talking about big options. Some of them very, very close to your backyard right now, if you pick up what I'm
really?
putting out. And he said, no, I'm staying here. It's Iowa State for me. It's going to be a lot of one possession games in that league this year. Iowa State's one I have circled. I think that's a big sleeper team.
This is another Kyle question from my son. He said, where do you see Coach Prime and the Colorado University Buffaloes in 2 years?
I don't see him there in 2 years. So I have no idea because I don't know what Colorado is when he leaves. Chip, I don't think of it as a program right now. I think of Colorado as more an experiment than a program. You're talking about bringing 72 kids in last cycle. They brought a team in. When you account for recruiting in the portal, they brought 72 kids. So a whole team. There are teams out there that sometimes don't have 72 scholarship players year to year. They brought a whole team in. Well, it stands to reason they're only there for one reason. And if that reason leaves, I think they're gone. I don't even know how Colorado claims to have a program right now. I don't think he'll be there in 2 years. Now, whether he'll elevate or just leave entirely is anyone's guess, because I'm not a big believer there's this huge market out there to hire him elsewhere. But you'd be very hard pressed to have me bet he's still there 24 months from now.
I appreciate you coming on, buddy. I really do. And tell everybody where they can find your show, just in case some of my subscribers are not already subscribers to your show.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. You know, I appreciate you. Appreciate the pizza. Appreciate the invite. If you want to watch video, you go on YouTube or even Rumble, search Late Kick with Josh Pate. If you're a podcast type, same thing. Pick your favorite podcast platform, Late Kick with Josh Pate. Find it anywhere.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you. And it's about to cut off. Thanks for being on the debut of the Football Talk with Coach Chip, the podcast. All right, coaches, that was the first Football Talk with Coach Chip, the podcast, with a good friend of Coach Chip, Josh Pate, of the Late Kick with Josh Pate on 247 Sports. The YouTube videos will remain. I have retired from on the field coaching due to some health issues. I'm fine. I'm not dying, but I just decided it's better for my quality of life. The only effect this will have on my videos and my consulting and my book writing is increase them. And because I'll have more time to do that. I've already got some in the works, some videos. I've got several book ideas. Got one's going to come out at the end of football season. I'm going to work on it all summer and through the season and have that ready to go when you guys are looking for something new or something different. From now on, the podcast is going to be coaches, primarily high school coaches. If you know somebody and you want them to be on the Football Talk with Coach Chip, the podcast, contact me at siegel.chip@gmail.com, siegel.chip@gmail.com. If you yourself want to be on it, don't worry about me telling everybody, yeah, he called me back. I won't do you that way. I'll say it's just a pleasure to have you on. I've got a list of over a page of guys I've written down that I'm going to be contacting over the next few weeks and try to get as many of them done this summer while coaches have a little time to do that. They'll be 20 to 30 minutes long, so I'm not going to take a ton of your time up. But if you know somebody or you yourself want to be on the Football Talk with Coach Chip, the podcast, so give me a holler at siegel.chip. It's on the screen at gmail.com. Again, the video portion, I know it's been slow lately, but I've been dealing with these things and getting back to normal as far as the video goes. Football Talk with Coach Chip. All right. Thanks again. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And be elite.